Bienvenidos, mis amigos, mis amigas, mis materos, mis materas. Welcome back to another episode of Mateina, your podcast that is powered by your online store, Somos Mateina. I am your host, Tomas, or you just can call me Thomas, whatever you prefer. It is really up to you. As long as you're here, as long as you stick with me for the next roughly 30 minutes, because we have a very interesting episode today. And I said very a lot because it is really interesting. We are looking at Yerba mate and how it developed in the world, how it grew, how it traveled, and how it slowed down a little bit in its native country, Argentina. However, Uruguay is seeing something interesting happening because of climate change. Don't we love climate change? I'm just kidding. This is going to be a very interesting topic, a very interesting episode. And then, of course, we have a Yerba of the Week review. Which Yerba are we going to review this time? I can tell you so much. As to, it starts with a P, ends with an O, and it comes from not Uruguay, not Argentina, but from another country that ends with a guay. And it was established in 1950. So stick around if you want to know which Yerba we're talking about. Another hint, it's one of the greatest ones for terere. So, without any further ado, I think we'll dive right into it. Yerba mate goes global. From a local ritual to the worldwide boom, and we've seen that in the past decade. Yerba mate has undergone a transformation that few traditional beverages have ever achieved. But what was once the deeply regional ritual rooted in South American culture is now a global superpower, and we can also call it a phenomenon. But the real story isn't just that the world discovered mate or mate discovered the world. It's how fast it happened and why. So let's start with numbers first, because they give a nice starting point. And then I'll give you a little bit more context to those numbers. So by the end of 2025, Argentina, the heart of the yerba mate production. Do you still remember who is the heart of the yerba mate consumption? It's not Argentina. Let's go back to the heart of yerba mate production. Recorded a historic surge in exports. Shipment reached around 58 million kilograms. That's about 6.3 US tons, marking a massive increase over 30% compared to previous years. And this was not just growth. It's a signal. It's a sign that mates had officially entered a new era. And what's even more interesting is where that growth is coming from. Because for decades, countries like Syria, we discussed this in a previous episode, have been among the biggest importers of Argentine mate, a legacy of migration patterns dating back to the early 20th century. But today, the map is expanding. Europe, the United States, and, now listen to this, even part of Asia are emerging as strong new markets. So, the question is, what changed? And part of the answer lies in the global wellness trend. Is it a trend? I don't think so. I think it will stick with us for a long time because people become more health conscious and consumers shift away from classic sugary drinks and overly processed energy beverages. Mate is taking its place because it's a natural alternative and it offers pretty much the same. It offers caffeine, but it also offers antioxidants and a cultural story, and all in one gourd. But the rise of mate isn't just about health, it's also about identity. Because unlike coffee, which is often consumed individually, mate is inherently social. As you already know, ronda, pass it to the next person. There's this cebador who fills up the gourd. And it's shared and experienced collectively. And in a world that's increasingly digital and isolated, the ritual is incredibly powerful because people aren't just drinking mate, they're adopting a lifestyle. The social media has accelerated this shift. Influencers, athletes, entrepreneurs, they are showcasing mate as part of their daily routines. For a good reason. Because it's healthy. And there is no sugar in it unless you put it in there. So what used to be a niche curiosity is now positioned as a symbol of productivity, mindfulness, and most importantly, connection. At the same time, companies are adapting. Traditional producers are now packaging mate in new formats, energy drinks, if you will, canned beverages, tea bags, to meet the global expectations. This hybrid approach allows mate to enter markets where the traditional gourd and bombisha might feel unfamiliar. But let's stick to Yerba itself and to the way the Guarani people drank it out of a gourd and a bombisha. And let's look at the twist here. Because while exports are booming, the domestic market in Argentina is still recovering. After a dip in national consumption, I don't know, my Argentinians, why did you stop drinking mate? Or slow down, let me say it that way. The local market grew modestly again in 2025, reaching around 266 million kilograms. That's roughly 293 US tons consumed. So I'll take it back. My Argentinian friends, you still drink a good amount of yerba mate. So still, that's not quite back to previous highs, showing a fascinating contrast. Mate is exploding abroad while stabilizing at home. And that creates tension. Because behind the global success story lies a more complex reality. Producers, so the farmers that grow the leaves, are not always benefiting equally. In fact, reports suggest that by late 2025, growers were receiving only about 11% of the final retail price. So while mate conquers the world, the people at its origin face increasing pressure. And this raises an important question for the future. Can the industry scale globally without losing its roots? Because mate isn't just a commodity. It's tied to an ecosystem, it's tied to traditions, and mostly to communities. And if global demand continues to rise, production must follow, by doing so sustainably. But that's a challenge. And there is also a cultural risk. As mate becomes more commercialized, will it lose its authenticity? Or will it evolve into something new, like coffee did a long time ago? One thing is clear, however. Yerba mate is no longer just a South American drink. It's becoming a global player in the beverage industry. And we're watching the transformation happening in real time. 11% goes to growers. I would almost call this a hidden crisis, because beneath that surface lays a different narrative. One that rarely ever makes the headlines. And that's unfortunately the story about the producers that only receive around 11% of the final retail price, which means the gap between what consumers pay and what farmers earn widened dramatically. So think about it. How much does a 250 gram yerba bag cost you? And now imagine 89% of what you paid goes to someone else that did not produce the yerba, that it did not harvest it, dry it, and so on. And whether it is in Buenos Aires, whether it is in Berlin or Los Angeles, it's all the same. Only a small fraction of that money actually reaches the people who grew the leaves. So how do we get there is probably a valid question. A major turning point came with new regulations in Argentina. The Instituto Nacional de la Yerba Mate, known as INYM, historically played a key role in setting reference prices for the industry. This helped maintain some balance between producers, processors, and retailers. But recent policy changes reduced that control. And without price regulation, market forces took over. In many cases, that meant downward pressure on what producers could earn, especially small-scale farmers. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to start a political discussion. I'm just stating facts. So fuel, labor, transportation, and equipment have all become more and more expensive. Climate variability has added another layer of uncertainty, affecting yields and increasing risk. So producers are caught up in a squeeze. Costs go up, prices paid to them go down. Demand keeps rising, but benefits don't trickle back evenly. It's a classic imbalance. And yet, not a lot of you know this side of the story, right? So what do you think about this? Let me know. Follow us on Instagram, Somos Mateina. Subscribe. If you follow us, you get a 10% off coupon on your first order on somosmateina.com. Please like this podcast. Follow us on TikTok. We're also on YouTube. And let me know what you think about this imbalance. Did you know the facts that I showed you today? Did you know that demand is rising, but prices paid to the farmers went down and the costs went up? From the outside, mate looks like a booming export success. It certainly does. New markets are opening, brands are expanding, and consumption is growing. But for many farmers, the reality is a little bit more complicated. Because some are adapting by forming cooperatives, sharing resources, and trying to gain more bargaining power. Others are exploring direct export models, cutting out intermediaries to capture more value. There's also a push towards differentiation. Instead of competing on volume alone, some producers are focusing on quality, certified organic or certified kosher, shade-grown cultivation, and sustainable practices. And these approaches can command higher prices, yes, sure, but they also require investment and time. And you should never forget about that, especially when you see a yerba bag that is a little bit more expensive. Think about how much of that bag goes back to the actual producer. And not everyone can make that transition, unfortunately. So the question becomes, what does a fair yerba mate industry look like? And this is also a question for you now, or to all of you, to the community. And I think it's something that we should be aware of. How should we continue? Should consumers be paying more to ensure sustainability? Should governments step back and stop regulating prices? Or should governments step in to regulate prices? Or will the market eventually correct itself? I'm very, very curious to know. Comment and please let me know. Follow and subscribe. It is fascinating to know how you see this. What is your take on this? Government interference, yes or no? Should consumers be paying the prices? Yes or no? Or do you think the market eventually corrects itself? Reaganomics, for example. Did it work or didn't it work? Again, this is not about politics. I just want to know what you think. Let me know your take on it, as long as we can keep drinking Yerba and also give back to the ones who provide us with that wonderful leaf. But I think one thing is for sure. The future of Yerba Mate doesn't just depend on global demand. It depends on whether the people who grow it can survive and thrive. Because without them, there is no mate. And without mate, there is no happiness. Well, it was a little bit extreme, but I needed to make a point. And then there is a new frontier coming. Climate change. It's redrawing the map where Yerba can grow. And you can go on somosmateina.com. There's on top a thing that is called news. And it's pretty much a blog. And there is one article that I wrote in which you will see a map and how the climate is changing in the mate growing regions and how it could look in the future, according to experts. Because for centuries, mate has belonged to a specific region of the world. Northern Argentina, southern Brazil, and Paraguay. In these areas, they provided the perfect conditions, the right temperature, rainfall, the soil for the plant Ilex paraguayensis, to make it thrive. But now something is changing. The climate is changing, and climate change is beginning to reshape the geography of Yerba Mate production, and the consequences could be profound. Because traditionally, Yerba Mate grows best in environments with moderate temperatures and consistent rainfall. However, rising temperatures and shifting precipitation patterns are disrupting this balance. And in some regions, droughts are becoming more frequent. In others, rainfall is becoming more intense but less predictable. And the soil? Yes, the soil, often already degraded from years of intensive agriculture. And it's struggling to adapt. And studies suggest that up to 80% of Yerba Mate growing soils in Argentina show signs of physical degradation affecting how water reaches plants' roots. And this, in simple terms, means that even when it rains, the plants may not benefit as much as they should and used to. So what is the result? Lower yields, higher risk, and increasing pressure on producers. But there's where the story takes an unexpected turn. As traditional growing regions face challenges, new areas are becoming viable. One of the most surprising candidates is, that's the drum roll, Uruguay. And historically, Uruguay has been the country that drinks most of the Yerba but doesn't really produce any. And as you probably know, most Uruguayan Yerba comes from plants that grow in Brazil, because Uruguay doesn't really produce its own Yerba. The climate is not the right one, the soil is not the right one, so they import nearly all of its supply. However, Uruguay has been one of the world's biggest, and in some years, and in a lot of years, even the biggest consumer of Yerba Mate. But now, thanks to changing climate conditions, part of Uruguay are becoming suitable for cultivation. Don't we love climate change? Well, when I say that, I'm just kidding, but yeah. It made Uruguay become suitable for cultivation. So small-scale projects have already started, and they're already on the way. In regions like Roja, That's northeast on the coast towards Brazil. Organizations are experimenting with growing yerba mate in natural ecosystems. Instead of large monocultural plantations, they are integrating mate into native forests, creating what's known as regenerative agriculture. And this approach has several advantages. It protects biodiversity, it improves soil health, it reduces the need for chemical inputs, and it aligns more closely with how yerba mate grows in the wild. Because there is one other yerba brand that I know that takes wild growing Ilex paraguayensis, and that's Pipore, that grows in Argentina. Could this be the key to the industry's future? Because climate change isn't just always a threat. As it clearly states here, it's also a catalyst for innovation. Producers are beginning to rethink traditional methods, shade-grown systems, mixed forests, and soil restoration techniques are gaining attention. There's even a philosophical shift happening. Instead of treating yerba mate as just another crop, more people are seeing it as part of an ecosystem, a plant that thrives when nature is respected rather than controlled. But this transition, I'm telling you that, won't be easy. Scaling these methods requires knowledge, investment, and collaboration, and it also challenges long-standing industrial practices. So theoretically speaking, the industry faces a crossroads. On one hand, we could continue with high volume, intensive production, and risk long-term damage. And on the other, we could shift towards a more sustainable regenerative system that may produce less, but lasts longer. And again, I'm asking you, my materos y materas, what do you think? Again, we're theoretically speaking here. This is for the future, but what do you think? High volume, or should we shift towards a more sustainable and long-lasting system? But as mate spreads globally, people are starting to ask not just what they're drinking, but where it comes from and how it is produced. And that awareness could drive a change. Because at the end of the day, the future of yerba and yerba mate won't just be decided in farms or factories. It will be shaped by a global community of drinkers like us, people who choose what kind of industry they want to support. Yeah. Fascinating topics. Fascinating topics. So what do you think? Where is the yerba industry headed? It's growing, we know that. It will never really slow down. Maybe have a slower year or two, but overall it's growing. And yes, we already know that it's growing towards the canned versions. But I also think with the canned version, although I'm someone who really loves to drink out of a classic calabash, and trust me, a calabash is easy to cure, it's easy to take care of. There is hardly any difference in terms of cleaning it and taking care of it than glass. You just have to know how to. And they also last you a very, very long time. And I am a firm believer that yerba just tastes better out of a calabash. The flavors are more intense. And it's also just nicer to hold in your hand. And again, it's easy to clean, it's easy to dry. You just have to know how to. And if you want to know how to take care of your yerba mate gourd, you go on somosmateina.com. On top you find section news and tips, and then you can go through some articles, and you will also see how to properly cure a mate, how to properly dry it. It's very simple. You can trust me. And as we are wrapping up the business side and where yerba mate is headed, we're going to come to our final topic, Yerba of the Week review. And I'm very happy because I picked a Yerba that, and the country that we have not looked at yet. Paraguay and Pajarito. And there is a moment that happens to almost everyone when they first try a truly strong Yerba mate. It's the first sip where you pause, maybe raise your eyebrows and think, ooh, it's different. And if that moment had a name, it might be very well Pajarito or Pajarito. Because Pajarito isn't just another Yerba mate brand. It's one of those experiences that stays with you. It's bold, it's intense. And for many people, it's the moment they realize that Yerba mate is far more complex than they expected. Because you've tried Yerbas from Argentina, you've tried Yerbas from Uruguay, which are pretty much what we discussed earlier, they come from Brazil. And then you go to Paraguay, like taste-wise, and you'll be surprised because it's, again, very different. Because Pajarito is one of those experiences. It's bold, it's intense. And it's the moment that brings you back to Paraguay in the 1950s. Because this was a time when Yerba mate wasn't a global trend or a lifestyle product. There was no talk about health consciousness. There was no talk about functional beverages. It was just simple, everyday life. And families shared their Pajarito. Workers relied on it and communities built rituals around it. And in 1956, a man named Gustavo Ratz and him and his family, they started producing Yerba in a very modest way. They worked with simple tools, dried the leaves using traditional methods, and packaged everything by hand. There was no large-scale industrial vision in the beginning. What they had instead was a commitment to quality and a deep respect for the craft. And over the years, that small operation grew into one of the most iconic Yerba mate brands in Paraguay. And today the name Pajarito, which means little bird, became widely recognized. And the brand slowly expanded beyond its borders. Today, it's not just a local favorite, it's a symbol of Paraguayan mate culture, reaching drinkers all over the world while still holding on to its roots. And those roots are important because they shape the flavor in a very real way. So when people talk about Pajarito, they almost always start with one thing: strength, or tereré. But let's look about the first. This is not just a mild or gentle Yerba mate. It has bold character traits that immediately stand out, especially if you're used to Argentine styles, which tend to be a little bit smoother and more balanced. And Pajarito comes from a different tradition, and you can just taste it from the very first sip. The leaves are processed using more traditional drying techniques, often involving smoke, and then aged for a long period of time, sometimes up to 24 months. And that aging process deepens the flavor, giving it its richness, its complexity, and it unfolds slowly as you drink it, and you can feel that dryness of the smoking process. And what you end up with is a mate that feels alive, constantly shifting and evolving with each refill. The taste itself can be surprisingly complex. At first you might notice grassy freshness, something green and almost wild. Then comes the deeper notes, slightly woody, sometimes even a little bit smoky. There can be a subtle sourness that catches you off guard. Not unpleasant though, but unexpected, adding another layer to that experience. And as you continue drinking, a gentle, maybe peppery finish might appear, lingering just long enough to remind you that this is a drink with personality. And that said, Pajarito isn't just one single experience. Over the years, the brand has developed different varieties that cater to different preferences and situations. The classic version is the one that most people think of, the strong, bold, rather smoky one with a balanced mix of leaves and stems. And then there are the more refined selections where the leaves are carefully chosen to create a slightly smoother, more rounder flavor while still keeping that characteristics that make it intense and smoky. There are also organic versions that are grown in a more natural environment. And then you have the flavored blends, which open up a completely different side of Pajarito. And these are mixed with herbs like mint or lemon, creating a lighter, more refreshing experience. They're often less bitter and more aromatic, making it especially appealing to newcomers and to those who like tereré, the cold one. And if you want to know how to make a tereré, just go on our Instagram, Somos Mateina, and you will see how to prepare a proper tereré. And we used a flavored version in this video. And these flavored versions are also closely tied to one of the most important traditions in Paraguay. And guess what it is? I already spoke about it. It's the tereré, of course. But no matter how you drink it, whether you drink it cold, whether you drink it warm, there's something deeper that Pajarito represents. Yerba mate itself has origins that go back centuries, rooted in the traditions of the Guarani people who considered it a sacred plant. And as we know, over time it became a symbol of connection, drinking it in a ronda. And Pajarito carries it forward in that very authentic way. Because in the end, Pajarito isn't just about flavor. It's about connection. It's about tradition. And the simple act of sharing something real. Paraguay and its tereré. The other tereré culture in Paraguay is immense. Most or a lot of yerbas that are good for tereré come from Paraguay. You'll also find some in our store, somosmateina.com. We ship worldwide. Go on our website, get your 10% off coupon. Follow us on Instagram and get a 10% off coupon. Get yourself a Pajarito. Try it. Let me know if you like it. Now that the summer is slowly approaching, tereré is obviously a good choice to cool down. Sit in the shade, have a sip, put some fruits, sliced fruits in your gourd. Get yourself a good yerba mate. Fill it up with ice cold water and just slurp on it. And with this, my friends, we have come to the end. And there is only one thing I can remind you of, that life is beautiful. Share a mate with someone you like. Go out there. If you are a mate drinker and you have friends who don't drink mate, go try to show them, introduce them to the ronda. Tell them that they should try it. It's a beautiful drink. Let them have a sip. Teach them a little bit about the beautiful cultural background and where it comes from, how mate grows. And if they're not interested in that, that's fine. Just take a sip of mate and enjoy it with someone you like, you love, with your friends, with your family. Just be kind to one another and enjoy your week. Thanks for listening, my friends, my materos, my materas. I'm glad you're here. And don't forget to subscribe. Go on Instagram, follow us, Somos Mateina, and visit our store, somosmateina.com. Maybe you'll find a present for yourself or for someone else. You'll find a nice yerba there that you have not tried yet. We have sample packs, small bags, 75 grams. You can test different ones and then decide which one you like. So thanks for having been here with me. Enjoy your week. Be kind to one another. And I'll see you next week. And don't forget, el café es para mortales, el mate para leyendas. I'm your host, Thomas. Thank you.